In this video, you're going to be taking a look at Luminara Unduli for the Clone Wars animated line, and this is in the red and white packaging for 2009 and 2010. And this is based upon her appearance from the Cloak of Darkness episodes, which was in Season 1. And this is when Asajj Ventress does the raid to get New Gunray off the Venator. This is a really good action figure. It's very petite, and it's trying to think how to phrase it properly, but I think delicate is probably the best word for it. You definitely want to be careful with this action figure. You don't want it to go through a lot of abuse. There are a lot of parts on it that could break easily, and as I mentioned, it's very petite, and because of it being petite, it makes a lot of the joints very sensitive. But it's, as far as the aesthetic is concerned, it's a very nice action figure, and it's of course, it's one of my favorite characters from the prequel trilogy. So what else can I say about Luminara here? She is voiced in the Clone Wars series by Olivia Diabo, who was also the princess from Conan the Destroyer. It's one of my personal favorite movies as well. In fact, one thing I'll know on the side is I actually watched Conan the Destroyer first before I did the Barbarian. So because of that, Conan the Destroyer is always going to have a special place for me in my movie history. So it's neat to see her play a role in the Star Wars universe, and I think she pretty much voiced Luminara for every single appearance of her throughout the entirety of the series, which unfortunately wasn't too many episodes, but at least she did get something. And at least we got an action figure of her from Hasbro. This was still during the time where Hasbro was doing a pretty good job knocking out as many characters as possible that made an on-screen appearance in the Clone Wars, even if they only were in an episode or two. We also did get Captain Argaius from the Cloak of Darkness episode as well, around the same time actually, and I do have that action figure. I will get around to reviewing him at some point. But unfortunately at this time I do not have her apprentice or Padawan, Barriss Offee, which that is one of the Clone Wars animated action figures I have been eyeing for a long while now, and I do hope to get it at some point. It's a little bit expensive, a little bit more than I really want to pay for it, but it's close enough where I'm willing to do it. So whenever I see a good deal at some point, and preferably brand new in the packaging, I will go ahead and get Barriss. But for now, we'll be taking a look at Master Luminara. So as I said, the sculpting work on this, the overall look, it's very nice. It looks exactly like how Luminara does on screen there in the Clone Wars series. She has a very stern expression, as you can see. I think the paint apps turned out very nicely. Did a nice job capturing some of the details unique to Luminara, especially like the I'm not sure if that's considered a tattoo or not, but on her chin. Her headdress here, it's not a removable piece. In the Black Series 3 3/4 inch action figure it is. I prefer that it's not. And thankfully it's not long enough to where it hinders the neck articulation. So it looks pretty good. As for the rest of her outfit here, I think that does a nice job capturing all the details unique to Luminara on her dress. You have the clasp there around her shoulders. Sleeves look good. You have the gauntlets around her forearms there. Have her belt, and you have the loincloth here with a nice pattern. And you do have a soft good skirt. And for the rest of her outfit, it's just basically black pants and black boots. But you can see what I mean where she's very petite and how the joints can be very sensitive because, as you can see, she's also super articulated. But because of the petite joints, you have to be very careful about how you pose her. Wouldn't want any of the limbs to snap off. The same goes for her arms as well. Belt here, it almost looks like it's a separate piece, but it is pretty much sculpted in on her waist there. So speaking of articulation, she does have a ball joint at the head and hinged shoulders and elbows. The elbows are not too restricted, even with the way her sleeve is cut there. So it's pretty good. She does have swivel forearms, then a swivel waist, and swivel hips, and hinged knees and hinged ankles. It's very impressive that Hasbro managed to get all this articulation into an action figure like this. Sometimes they use the excuse, especially like the recent 88 action figure from the Jabba's Throne set. They mentioned they could not put, or Hasbro mentioned that they could not put elbow articulation in him because the limbs are too small. But then you look at an action figure like this and it's like, well, you know, Luminara's arms here really are not a whole lot bigger than what 88s are. But they managed to pack in their articulation here, so make of that as you will. In terms of weapons and accessories, she's very light. I suppose she pretty much has everything she really needs. So she does have an ignited lightsaber here. And from my understanding, there's actually a variant of this lightsaber. There's this one here, which is a much more of a clear green plastic, as you can see. Clear green blade. And then Hasbro did in 2010 go back and do a running change and corrected it and made it a much more darker green. Personally, I would prefer to have the darker green blade, but this is okay too. I think that hilt is unique to Luminara. She does have a very hard time holding the lightsaber. In fact, I have to have her hold it at the bigger part here at the end. Otherwise, it just falls out of her hand. And I'll show you here. Now you can see the grip right there. And if I just have it like that, it's just simply not going to hold. So I pretty much have to do it like this. And then she does also have an unignited hilt, which is nice for Hasbro to include, but there's not a peg or anything or a spot on her belt where you could plug it in. It is hollowed out there, so in theory, if you have a spare lightsaber blade from the past during the saga days, perhaps you could utilize that with this. You can have her run around with an unignited hilt. These Hasbro gave a little something. I think that's pretty much all I can tell you about Luminara here. It is kind of difficult to get her to stand as well because of how small her feet are. And unfortunately, she can't really accommodate a stand too well. You can get a little bit, but it's not much. But before we go, I will do a couple comparisons. So since I don't have Barris, we'll have to bring out some other prequel Jedi here. Take a look at Shaak Ti. Looks pretty good beside her. I do have a review for Shaak Ti on the channel. And then one that will be up next, Aayla Secura here. And they look pretty good together. And we'll just bring one more out here. Master Yoda himself. They all look really good together. I always like getting the Clone Wars animated Jedi together. There's something very neat looking about the aesthetic of the Clone Wars animated Jedi characters, and it's great seeing them all together. Hope to collect many more, especially, like as I said, Barris, Eathcoth I would like to get, and I know there's several others as well. I think Evan Peel even got an action figure at one time. I'm sure there's so many others as well, but I do have quite a few of them. And as I mentioned, I think either in the Obi-Wan video or the Yoda video, I do hope to eventually do like all the Jedi that I have in my collection for the Clone Wars animated line together. I think that'd be a neat video to make, so stay tuned for that. So would I recommend Luminara for your collection? I don't think I mentioned exactly how I acquired her. I got her in November of 2020, loose, online, and I only paid about $21 for her. Not a bad deal at all. As far as all the prequel Jedi from the Clone Wars anime line are concerned, Luminara is fairly affordable. Definitely more affordable than Barris Selphie even. And even if you get a Luminara brand new in the package, last I checked, a lot of the prices were usually in the $30 or $40 range, which is really not a bad deal at all for the animated line. A lot of those Clone Wars action figures are very expensive these days. So if you can find Luminara between $20 or $40, I think you're doing pretty good. And I would highly recommend her for your collection as well, especially if you're a fan of the character, you're a fan of prequel Jedi, the Clone Wars series. I think she's a great addition for your collection. And I'm happy she's part of mine. But anyways, that concludes this review. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for plenty more reviews in the future. There will always be more to come. If you haven't already, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. I always appreciate all your support, and check out some links in the description if you haven't done so already. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.